just tell me something about how the film came about, really.
Okay, so Jamshid, who's not here, lives and works in Iran, and he came across our production company and me as a producer through a film of his that was shown in Amsterdam at IDFA, and he sent over some rushes of the footage of Maya being taken to the north of Iran, to the border of the Caspian Sea, and there were just a few images that he sent across, and we started a conversation based on the back of that. And very quickly, we realized we needed to build a slightly more fluid team, which is where Ladan came in. She's a filmmaker in her own right, and I've known Ladan for years. We've worked together, and she's also Iranian, so she could bring to the film a creative bridge between the productions of the UK and the Iranian side. Right,
brilliant. From your point of view, Anson, how did you? I mean, obviously, when you saw that first stuff, you must have thought, well, I have a subject here. But when did it kind of dawn on you, really, that this was a story in a way? Because it very much is that, isn't it? It's not just a subject. There's a narrative flow through it. So did it have to wait until you met Mohsen, or you knew you were onto something from the beginning, really?
Well, I think so, and I'll bring in Ladan because we did spend a lot of time going through. So Jamshid had shot, the trip to the north, and there were a few hours of footage there that we had gone through, and it's the sort of, there was a lot of it was talking with Jamshid, but there's lots of layers of understanding what the footage was, what wasn't. When you see footage, when you haven't been on the shoot yourself, there's lots of stuff that hasn't been filmed. Yes. And you don't know that if you haven't been on the shoot. So a lot of that process, I'd say, was understanding what wasn't being filmed, and that told us more about the bigger stories that could be told within this film, because there were sort of storylines that hadn't been followed up or were thought to not be interesting, which perhaps were more interesting than Jamshid thought. But I think those layers were one of the most intriguing and difficult parts of making this film, which is probably a good place for Ladan.
Yes.
To bring that, the clarity of that was which was needed.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, basically we had all of this footage and we kind of relived the story through watching this footage and kind of like detectives trying to understand what was happening and who were these characters. And the more we were watching, the more we were realizing there is like such an opportunity to create something, because the relationship they all had, whether with the tigers or between themselves, was so wonderful and so intriguing. So we were kind of in this long process before to just digitize, watch everything and make sense of this other world. And we spent so much time that it was already too late. The story was already starting in a way. So.
Yes. And had he made that footage for a kind of feature-length documentary idea, or was it as part of his television work? Because I'm very intrigued that he really is a television filmmaker in a way, isn't it? I mean, it's there is the key moment in the thing where you see the film that he made of the lion incident. I don't want to do a spoiler, but that's about that, the relationship of the lion and and that's just a straightforward bit of news footage, and this other stuff. So what was he doing with his material? What was his plan for it?
Well, he had been working in the TV, in Iranian TV for 20 years or so, basically his whole career so far, and had just recently decided to step away. And so this really was in a sense, his first personal, what we call passion projects, I guess. He was interested in it. There was the relationship between Mohsen and Maya, which was at the heart of it, which we very quickly found common ground that we thought in similar ways about human relationships with the natural world and how you could create a film that explored that on all of its different levels. And so really he shot it because that's what filmmakers do when they see something interesting and pick up a camera. So in its simplest sense, Jamshed is a filmmaker. That's but he's lived in the within the world of Iranian TV, whereby maybe Ladan, you could fill in for people who don't know Iranian TV, but there's for him to produce something for an international audience, he really wanted help in doing that. He didn't have a bird's eye view of what a different aesthetic might be, how like a longer narrative might be. Iranian TV has particular style, and he was finding it hard to get out of that. So that's why the collaboration.
How old is he actually? It's just,
That's an indiscreet question.
Well, I'm not asking how old you are. But is he, when you say he's stepped away from television, so he'd be kind of retiring that?
So I think, I mean, to weigh in on what Anson was saying, so he's I think in his above 50s, right? So because the Iranian TV, he worked in kind of quite formatted style, but he also had all of these ambitions to try and create work that was going a bit more in depth, or that was a little bit more poetic, that wasn't necessarily answering a straightforward TV brief on nature documentaries, because they are slightly more on the more traditional side, and I think that's why he kind of was investigating how do I take this subject and do something different, and on top of that, for an international audience who might not know as much about Iran, and that was his.
All right. Yes. Oh, it's great. So. And presumably, almost immediately, then your plan is not just to use somebody else's footage and kind of top and tail it. You are immediately looking to making a film yourself, aren't you, Anson? So from that stage on, there must have been all sorts of negotiations, really. I mean,
yeah, but it wasn't. And it was to make the film with Jamshed, so it wasn't that we were taking the footage. We could have done that. We could have tried to buy the footage from him, I guess, and then produce it. But I mean, I think at its core, it really is a collaboration, and I think that brings a lot to it, and because. And what's interesting in hindsight, I realize, we did talk about this, but Jamshed lives and works still in Iran.
Yes.
A lot of filmmakers produce films and still live and work in Iran, but a lot of films might be made by people who go into a country, they can make a shoot, and then they leave, and then they can sort of present a film which has a particular sort of angle, I guess, and so we were really clear that this is not what this is about.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's true, actually. I mean, that is pretty much a model, isn't it, of international documentary making now. It really is a bit of a hit and run, I think, in some cases, isn't it? It's like, let's descend on a scene and make the film and it, bugger off, really. It's a bit of that goes on, I think. But I thought, go on, Ladan,
I want to add something else, which I think is quite important to highlight, is the fact that this whole film was a conversation. It was a collaborative conversation from the beginning, whether in its physical form of us talking all the time with him, whether it is in the creative sense. It was a conversation that was, back and forth between his vision, Anson's vision, my input, and it was really evolved in this way, rather than he gives his footage and then it's kept done here. It was really the opposite of that.
Oh, that really comes across, doesn't it? I mean, it's got that kind of warmth of everybody being on the same page, for want of a better word. And then technically, when you're starting to think about going out there and doing that stuff, then presumably you're talking about, oh, are we taking our crew? Are we using their crew? How did all that work out? I mean, one of the things, I mean, it's technically brilliant, isn't it? I mean, you know, the footage is really beautiful. And the sound and everything is really very top-notch stuff. And I just wondered how you'd done that, how much you were using of people on site and how much you brought in.
Yeah, well, I guess Maya's very beautiful, so we had to
really
to produce it.
Yeah, really.
So we, you know, Jamshid. So as Ladan's outlined, it was this conversation, and so for 2 to 3 years we filmed within Iran without going there. It was constant conversations with Jamshid and these evolving storylines within the zoo and the discoveries that happened there with the death of some other tigers. Was filmed with us in the UK, and Jamshid would use camera crews in Iran, in Mashhad, and then towards the end, and as those storylines evolved, we would be piecing them together, and then we sort of built a list of scenes that we needed and questions that were unanswered that we shot when we had this 3-week window. When I went to Iran, we brought our own cinematographer, but we hired sound crews from within Iran. So it is truly a collaboration. There was no
brilliant
sort of bringing in or muscling other people out of the way. Yeah. But
fantastic.
In Iran were amazing, and it's quite a sort of, I felt very lucky that we got 3 weeks, because it's quite hard to get a visa to shoot in Iran, and I think because of the way Jamshid had filmed and the way we set the project up, which didn't have any ulterior motives, which is what other filmmakers can, you know, be trying to get into a country to do.
Indeed. And I mean, I have to say, I didn't spot the join, as it were. So it's a seamless experience, which is really wonderful. And also, I mean, there's a kind of perception that people in these countries don't have sophistication and everything, but actually there's a really strong film culture, and as you know, in many parts of the world, and their technical training and their equipment are as good as ours, aren't they? Really, better.
Great filmmaking is one of the best in the world.
It really is. Well, Ladan, well, I don't want to go off topic, but you have worked with some wonderful people, haven't you? I mean, Farhadi and Kirstami. So.
Yes, I think that Iranian cinema has influenced not only young people in Iran to make films, but also worldwide. There's a whole language, a whole style, and it's just and it dates back to a long time. It's not just a recent, you know, culture. Like both photography and cinema have been around in Iran for a very long time, and there's a lot of young people there who are extremely talented and who make a lot of beautiful fiction films as well as documentaries. So
yes, really. I thought you used British music, is that right? I thought the music is really lovely and very much a part of it, you know, sound, music, sound design, music, everything works together. But you used a British composer.
It's a British composer called Chris White, who we've worked with before, and I think it was the closeness to that relationship which we needed at the end of that process. It was a long process of making this film, so that relationship that we already had was helpful at that stage. But we do there's one track from an amazing oud player who's Iranian called Negar, and she lives in Germany now, but she licensed us one track. But all of the music but Chris has got a great ear, and he used performers in around where he lives down near Brighton, who from Iran or different with using different instruments. So there was a lot of sensitivity to bring. Yes,
it all works really well, and of course that's true. We are in a world culture now, aren't we? And we know Iranian people in this country, and they can. So it's really not, it's not an issue in a way, is it? It works, I think. It's really good. We have a little filmmaking group here, and we were talking about, let's, make a documentary. There was a long discussion about, there are two types of documentaries. There's the one where you kind of script it, and then you go and get the pictures and you slot them in. And then there's the other sort where you're like, let the camera run, and then you make the film at that stage. Now, I think this is a kind of false dichotomy in a way, but it's certainly what a lot of people are learning in film schools and things. But really, I suppose this is a bit more like a kind of fly on the wall or sort of found footage film in a way, and that you're doing a lot of assembly of it, really, in editing and so on. Is that how you saw it?
Well, I think, we had an amazing editor as well, Ollie Huddleston, and he's got an exceptionally keen and acute eye for cutting in-scene sequences, i.e. it's footage from one space and one place, which he will watch and then instinctively just cut together so that it holds and will have an integral beginning, middle, and an end. Yeah. And really, the footage we went through and we cut every scene together and then found the meaning within it and how that would then lead on to the next scene. So a lot of the time, it's a bit half and half, because there was a lot of footage that we cut together and we found its direction, but then we found a sort of when we discovered its story, we then built scenes around that and stitched it together.
Yes. And I think in a way, a lot of this is kind of about budget and everything, isn't it? And I think in kind of television documentary making, especially now, it's very much about the economics of it, isn't it? You really do kind of, we know the story, here are the films, here are the pictures, slot them in, because they're trying to. And I think actually, in a way, presumably that's very true in Iranian television. So I think Jamshid, maybe, is that right? He probably maybe would have come a bit more from that school, knowing what he wanted and going to get it. I don't suppose he would be out there. But as you say, this was a passion project for him, so he was able to experience a bit more freedom.
If I may answer this one, I think that what one should not forget is the fact that even if he comes from the television background, because of that same reason that Iran has a very big cinema culture, it is not a complete foreign notion to him.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's so prevalent, and people are so used to the type of language and imagery that even if a lot of people who also make short films or more creative and fiction films in Iran might have also worked for television, but they understand each other's language.
Yes.
Because of that history, I think.
Yes. I'm sure that's true, and I think traditionally that was the case here, really. I think a lot of people, especially in the golden age of British TV documentary and everything, people move back and forth. So there was a lot of that, really. I thought, of course, the main thing is you are extremely lucky in Mohsen, because he is very articulate, isn't he? And he's willing to talk things through, and the film gets into all sorts of fascinating psychological and philosophical areas quite naturally. There's no sort of talking head figure to say, what about this? So it goes, and I'm wondering if that's I don't know, it sounds a bit strange, but do you think this is a sort of function of Iranian culture in a way, that it is more people are more able to talk about deep things and express themselves? Do you not find that?
Not necessarily, no. I think that is more kind of case-by-case scenario of people's personality, rather than talking deeply or personally about the subject. Because I think within the Iranian culture, people are very discreet about their own personal spaces. And if
Right.
anything, that was more of a challenge to kind of get him to open up. And I think,
Yes.
yeah, it's not necessarily a given.
Right. Oh, that's
very
interesting.
discreet about talking about
Yeah.
their personal, intimate world, which I think.
Right. Yes. Well, in that case, then he really is a tremendous find, isn't he? Because he does invite you in. I mean, obviously, he does invite you into his house later on, and you've got all his home movies and all that stuff. But he does invite you into his kind of philosophical, spiritual kind of world, doesn't he? Really, and the relationship between humans and animals is very much about that. Really, I thought. I mean, it's what I like about it very much is it's not in any sense a kind of issue film, although all the issues are there, but the issues are not foregrounded. So it's not. Now, I have to say that I wonder, well, maybe come on to it, but I wonder whether you did get any resistance to it when you're trying to sell it in the market, because it's got the word zoo in it, and it's, these things are highly controversial. A lot of people, I mean, literally, some friends of mine said, oh, I can't watch that film because it's about zoos. And that's unfortunate, but to me, I mean, always, I watch lots of foreign films, obviously, but it's always fascinating to see another culture, and I was fascinated to see that Iran has an active animal welfare world, there are regulations and all that, and I thought that was one real insight into people do have the same concerns about animals in the same way. And some of it, the historical stuff, was fascinating. The idea that when Iran was a kind of under the Soviet domination, that the Russians built the animal sanctuary place for releasing animals. I mean, who would have thought that? I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, the zoo. There's a real history of zoos in cinema, which goes back to the beginning of cinema, really, and there's, for obvious reasons, there's quite strong metaphors that can be made. But even modern day, we found out recently that YouTube's first video to be uploaded to YouTube was My Day at the Zoo. So zoos have sort of they're closely linked to film and media.
Very much.
I mean, we didn't the film wasn't intended to be about a zoo in Iran.
No.
We wanted to really try and make a film that bridged that unbridgeable divide between the human and the animal world, and so between Mohsen, the main human character, and Maya, the main animal character. And they go on this incredible journey to the north, which isn't in a zoo, it's in the home of the Caspian tiger that's now extinct. Yeah. And so really to try and make a film that had an empathy towards a sentient being that there's no way of understanding is really what we try to do. And in following our nose, you end up creating footage, and there's scenes within the zoo and the home of this tiger, which is obviously the reality of her world.
Yes. I thought the philosophical stuff is really what appealed to me. I mean, what is the nature of an animal's consciousness, and how is it like ours? How does it differ from ours? I thought all that stuff is, and it's so beautifully done, because there's no, you don't wheel in a kind of animal expert to say, it just emerges from the material, and it's so beautiful. And as you say, when questions of freedom and constraint, and when Maya is outside, and Maya, it's really a deep philosophy, isn't it? It's about determinism and free will, and to what extent is Maya, Maya's own free will, can Maya free herself? I mean, when Maya learns to hunt but doesn't learn to kill, and I thought that's, just extraordinary, an extraordinary sequence, really. It's beautiful. I also, I thought, in a way, because it's about the relationship, isn't it? And you do, whether you want to or not, you're kind of drawing parallels between the man and the animal, in that, Maya is constrained very much, but so is Mohsen, isn't he? I mean, he's not really free, because in building that relationship with Maya, he's created obligations for himself, hasn't he? So he kind of is the parent, and it's. But also, I mean, the other thing that, when we think about animals in all our lives, I mean, I like the parable thing that you have at the beginning. I thought was really, immediately sets the tone. When we think about animals in our lives, people who work with animals and live with animals, I think, as I said in my little review, that Maya is both his charge, someone he's responsible for. She's also his stock in a way. So it's both, isn't it? It's like understand the animal, love the animal, use the animal, and absolutely fascinating. The other thing that, leaving aside that, which obviously is kind of core of the film, for a lot of people, it would be very interesting to see the business of working and filming inside, what I suppose we would call totalitarian state in that sense, with total media control and so on. And I thought that was really, to me, that was fascinating as somebody, as a journalist. The access, there's strange negotiations about, well, you can shoot the animals, you can't shoot the people, or you can shoot people but don't show them, scratching their bum or whatever. Well, it was something, wasn't it? There was a bit of that. Oh, you're not making a look good. But then in the end, Jamshid actually gets in the meeting. He's in the meeting. Now, I thought, you actually, in Britain, we have free media. You wouldn't have been allowed in a meeting of the London Zoo Committee, because that would have been commercial confidentiality. So we're all operating under constraints in the same way. I mean, what did you think about that? I was kind of genuinely, and the relationship, the way people deal with that overbearing kind of authority. I mean, it's the amazing sequence where the zoo owner, who, I don't know whether he's a villain or what he is, but we don't know, do we? Luckily, it's very nicely ambiguous. But where he says, well, I'm going to come over here now and pretend to tell you off for a bit, because that's what they want me to do. So, and then he pretends to tell them off, and then the thing goes on. And I thought, this was wonderful, really so fascinating.
I think that it's well done. I mean, it's nice that you've picked up on it. I think, yes, preconceptions of a country like Iran were really satisfying to find ways of pulling that rug, because, yeah, we had no problem with access when we were in Iran. It's the beautiful people with open arms would allow us in. And Jamshid has an incredible way of being with people to shoot scenes like that, whereby he's not a threat. And you're absolutely correct in sort of picking up on the ideas that, yeah, we would never, to find access to, I guess, a moment whereby as an institution might be being policed in terms of perhaps they've been doing some wrongdoing. Within the UK, you wouldn't get the access to that. So there is this, it's confusing, isn't it?
It is. It is.
There's a lot of, just, it's not simple to say that Iran's a totalitarian state. It's just is sort of wrong and on so many levels. But on one level, you could, lots of people, that's how they think. So I think that was definitely, it was talked about, and there was a lot of our intention to try and show the human side of the Iranian experience, which is, we hope, to shatter some of those preconceptions.
Yes,
pick up from that.
Well, that is really what filmmaking is about, isn't it? Really, it's about just, you think you know what it's like to live in Iran. But that's, I mean, actually, I mean, you know, for me, actually, my kind of eye-opening thing was really with obviously Iranian fictional films and Fahadi. I mean, when I saw A Separation, I was kind of, what? This is nothing like I imagined it. And you know, that's so good. That's what we're in business to do, isn't it? Really, I think.
And I think also one thing to add, and I think that was also a point that was quite important for Jamshid and for a lot of Iranians, is the fact that Iran, like many other countries, has its own problems,
Yes.
but the way it's always depicted in the media is only one-sided way, or it's always one version, and people omit the fact that there's so many other versions of the country, and there's still a lot of people living there and who live a kind of semi-normal life, and we shouldn't erase that depiction or that narrative completely from the landscape.
Absolutely.
And that was very important to be like, well, there is also other things, other aspects, other layers, other sensitivities, and not always focus on that one narrative that I don't even want to get into, but it was just to look at different narratives coming from the country.
Yes, very much. And the other thing, of course, is in the background, there's the kind of insistent sort of drumbeat of war and sanctions. And there's all that in the background, but that's really nice because it appears in the film as just it's like, oh, here's the weather today. Oh, here's a broadcast about we might be having a war, and it's there in the background. And of course, I mean, well, without getting political, we're kind of rather living with that here ourselves now. I see every day we're kind of allegedly preparing for a war with somebody or something, and it's in the background of people's lives, isn't it? It's just like a drumbeat. But I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, there's stuff about women's lives. Again, is interesting for people. I noticed you have the bit early on about the photographer, who is a really fascinating figure, and that I thought that was really very rewarding, that sequence. I enjoyed that very much.
Great. A wonderful photographer.
Yeah.
But the sanctions and the background media noise. I mean, the idea is that that's there too, but it is very real. I mean, that is, you have to. It's then about creating an empathy for people who, I mean, you get used to living with that, which is, you know, something worth thinking about when we're in the West as to whether these sanctions are the right thing.
Yes, very much.
On the ground that are being.
Yes. Now they nagged me and said I mustn't go on too long, so we're supposed to have about half an hour. So, but once you've made the film, you assemble it. You at that point, then you've got the whole commercial element to come in, or were you? To what extent did you know how it was going to be sold and everything at the beginning? Were you? I mean, is there a ready market for it, or do you make the film and then you have to start doing all that?
I mean, do you want the truth or the half?
Oh no, the truth. We only have the truth here.
No, it was a wonderful co-production with ZDF Arte and
yes,
a number of European broadcasters that came on board early on, and the BFI, and that was the finance that got the film made. It's not made a profit. It's made a loss. So it's cost us money to make this film.
It's not over yet, though, is it? It's a long game.
There is no broadcast in the UK. So the European broadcasts have been great. The UK is not taking the film. And so we're still looking to produce an outlet for it.
Good. I mean, we could talk about that, couldn't we? I mean, why is there no UK? I mean, what's been the reaction? I mean, it's really only the BBC, I suppose, isn't it? We're talking about what's the BBC? Presumably you've had lots of conversations with the BBC about it?
It's probably for another day to have that conversation, but I think for us actually the most important thing is to create a bit of awareness about the film through festivals, and what we would love to do, and it is about finance, it's about money, but it would be to create screenings to be made more available within Iran, and to actually take the film and to create more of an outreach program there, perhaps, to look at animal welfare in various other zoos, and including Maya. But and in North America as well, we'd like to do the same there with festivals. So,
but it actually, I mean, we all kind of need educating, don't we? And I think, you know, in Britain, it would be really nice for, you know, children to see it, and the kind of zoo people, because I mean, they're very much on the back foot, aren't they, really? But zoos, well, zoos have a really important role in, and always have had, in how we understand animals, and it's but it is true, isn't it, that zoo is a kind of red flag word in a way at the moment. That might be.
I mean, I think for me, what's exciting is I guess stories around rewilding, because we've come about in the last few hundred years for various reasons, to do with our various reasons. And so, you know, it's great that you can now see beaver within the UK. And, the zoo should be our natural environment that we live within. So they have, you know, so without going into zoos, but that seems like a very exciting thing.
Yes.
Was this program to try and reintroduce tigers in north of Iran, in the Caspian Sea, which is why that facility was there that Maya went to. So, you know, there's possibilities and hope that perhaps that can be looked into again. Yes,
well, that's a really nice and interesting thing. I suppose it's a bit of a spoiler if I ask you what's happened since, really, but. I mean, I suppose Patrick can snip that out, but I'm genuinely intrigued to know what happened.
I mean, COVID happened. First thing to say, and so the zoo was shut for a very long time. But Maya's still there. The zoo's reopened. I think the zookeeper has stepped down. His nephew or someone else in the family is now running it. There's lots of changes for the good that are happening, and I think Maya's had new cubs. So, what else do you know, Ladan?
Not really. I think because of COVID, a lot of things have been put on hold. So there hasn't been much advancement in terms of the investigation, or in terms of I think COVID had just kind of put a big pause on everything. And Maya is, as Anson said, Maya is still there, and I'm not sure. Don't have much more information than that right now.
And what happened to Mohsen? What's his subsequent career trajectory? Is he still a kind of celebrity taxidermist, or?
I think he still does taxidermy, but we need to ask Jamshid exactly what he's doing now.
Yes. I wonder whether it has given him what he wants. I don't know. What did you feel he was? Well, obviously he wants to make a living, doesn't he? He wants to live, but there certainly is an element in which it's like, we're an act, and I'm a star now. So it's a bit of the star power of him, and they were a double act, and now he's gone solo. It's a bit, it's a bit different, isn't it? Really. But I thought he was a nice man and a good man. Did you feel that, or well, let's not ruin it for everybody. But what in the end, from the whole project, what did you feel about the people involved in it, really?
Mohsen is a lovely guy, full of humor and very quick-witted and playful. And he has an incredibly wonderful skill with animals, and it's not just tigers, but his relationship with Maya is astounding. But it's with all animals. It was quite. He's a whisperer. For sure. I mean, you sort of question his character, which I think the film does, because I feel like he's robust enough to take it in a way, but really they're all questions that we hope are delivered in a way that feel as though you can recognize those parts to one's own character within them. And really, like you say, he's just trying to live. So he's not trying to do anything extraordinary. But for him at this time to become successful in a sort of celebrity way was a way to live. So that maybe followed that narrative, and it's making your life make sense, isn't it?
Yes, very much. And as a filmmaker, obviously, you have a responsibility. You feel that now. People are very concerned about this now. I think, obviously, when I was younger, I think people didn't so much concern themselves with what happened to their subjects. But you kind of you're keeping in touch in a way. Keeping. Oh, but well, you've left things in a good state. You haven't done any damage.
No, we'll see. When we see Mohsen again, it will be nice. Jamshid's in touch with him.
Oh, that's good. That's really brilliant.
Yes.
Well, I really do love this film, and I want as many people to see it as possible. I think it's that thing, the relationship between ourselves and animals, is extremely interesting.